October 27, 1962. A U.S. Navy destroyer drops depth charges near a Soviet submarine in the Caribbean. Unbeknownst to the crew, that submarine carries a nuclear torpedo. The sub's captain, stranded deep underwater and cut off from Moscow, assumes war has already begun. He gives the order to arm the weapon. One vote among his officers stops its launch. But what if that vote had gone the other way? What if a single torpedo had triggered World War III? The Cuban Missile Crisis wasn't just a 13-day standoff. It was a chaotic sequence of near misses, faulty intelligence, and split-second decisions. By late October 1962, Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba were operational, and U.S. invasion plans were finalized under Operation Ortsac. President Kennedy's advisors were divided. The Joint Chiefs demanded an airstrike, while diplomats pushed for a blockade. But behind closed doors, both sides knew the truth. Neither controlled the timeline. Consider this. The U.S. had already approved that and 500 air sorties over Cuba, and Soviet field commanders secretly had authority to launch tactical nukes without Moscow's approval. On Black Saturday, October 27th, a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba, killing the pilot. Kennedy's military chief saw this as an act of war. Had the president greenlit retaliation, Soviet forces in Cuba would have likely targeted Florida's Homestead Air Force Base with 20-kiloton warheads, incinerating Miami within minutes. A nuclear strike on Florida would have forced Kennedy's hand. Retaliatory ICBMs from U.S. bases in Turkey and Britain would have rained down on Moscow, Kyiv, and Leningrad. But here's the twist. The USSR's early warning systems were primitive. In 1962, Soviet radar once mistook a flock of geese for incoming missiles. A single explosion over Havana could have been misinterpreted as a full-scale attack, triggering a launch-on-warning response. The human cost? Catastrophic. Declassified Pentagon estimates suggest a U.S. counterstrike would have killed 108 million Soviets immediately. American casualties from Soviet ICBMs would have surpassed 50 million, but the real nightmare begins after the blasts. Nuclear winter models show soot from burning cities blocking sunlight for a decade, collapsing global agriculture. Starvation, not radiation, becomes the leading cause of death. Europe's NATO allies, bound by treaty, join the war. Paris and London vanish in fireballs as Soviet bombers retaliate. Let's assume the war ends after 30 days. The Northern Hemisphere lies in ruins, but the Southern Hemisphere survives, altered forever. Australia and Argentina become accidental superpowers, their wheat fields now feeding the world. In Africa, newly independent nations like Nigeria and Kenya reject both NATO and the Warsaw Pact, forming a militarized, non-aligned bloc to exploit the power vacuum. But the Cold War's ideological battle isn't over. China, spared from direct strikes, emerges as the dominant communist power. Mao Zedong, seeing the USSR's destruction, accelerates his nuclear program. By 1970, Chinese missiles threaten Sydney and Los Angeles, setting the stage for Cold War 2.0. Meanwhile, in America's irradiated Midwest, warlords battle over canned food. A U.S. government in exile operates from Panama. The Cuban Missile Crisis didn't end with treaties or handshakes. It ended because exhausted leaders lied to their own militaries. Kennedy secretly removed U.S. missiles from Turkey, while Khrushchev downplayed the scale of his retreat to Politburo hardliners. Both knew the alternative meant obliteration. So the next time someone calls diplomacy weak, remind them. In October 1962, it's the only reason we're still here. Agree? Disagree? Drop a comment with your take. And if you think this timeline's dark, wait until we explore what if Hitler won World War II.
This is Bites of Goats, where we don't just talk about history, we learn from it. See you in the next one.